That's what it is. Ding! I just put my finger on it. Don't you love how prepared I am to sit down and talk to you about books? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to tell you about all of the books that I read in the month of September, except those that I've already talked about in their own video, or plan to. So is this just a wrap up? Yeah, pretty much it's just a wrap up. Though I tend to be a little bit more long-winded when it comes to my recent reads videos than I think a responsible booktuber is in a wrap up. So I don't know. Depends on how you want to look at it. First, I want to tell you about the only arc that I read in the month of September. That book is Rewind by Catherine Ryan Howard. This book is described as Psycho meets Fatal Attraction. And yeah, kind of, it sort of is. It's the story of Natalie, who is an Instagrammer and a rather successful and well-known Instagrammer. And she suspects her husband of having an affair. So she starts retracing her husband's steps back to places that she thinks he was in with his lover. And while she's at the seaside cabins, she's murdered. From there, it very much becomes a murder mystery story, told mostly through the eyes of an aspiring reporter. Audrey has a job writing the not so important entertainment stuff for an online news outlet. She's the perfect person to report about a missing Instagrammer. However, she takes it upon herself to get more involved in the story. And even when it becomes this murder mystery, she is determined to get to the bottom of what happened to Natalie. Rewind is basically like a 3-star read for me. I liked it fine. I always go back and forth when it comes to the amateur sleuth trope in thrillers where somebody who's not a detective or in any way, shape, or form trained in law enforcement takes it upon themselves to sort of solve a crime. That can sometimes be done really well, and it can sometimes fall on its face. So it's always up in the air for me. This time it was okay. Audrey definitely didn't do anything too unbelievable, where you would think somebody off the street trying to solve a murder wouldn't be able to do. So it wasn't necessarily that. I will tell you that I got really excited with the premise of this book being about a famous Instagrammer. Whether it's someone's hobby or career path, it's nice to see the role of influencer being recognized and portrayed in popular things like books or TV episodes, etc. Or movies. So that was part of the attraction to this book for me. However, I will say, unfortunately, like the fact that Natalie is an Instagram influencer ends up having absolutely nothing to do with the book. Like, she could have been any quasi-famous person and the exact same things would have happened. I would have liked that aspect to have played a bigger role. But the book is set in Ireland, which I always romanticize Ireland a little bit for some reason. I'm not even sure why. I'm not Irish. There's a lot of characters in this book. Perspective shifts a lot between cabin manager Natalie, Audrey, Natalie's husband's love interest. The actual detective. So it's a very choppy book and chronologically sort of messed up. So the gimmick that the book uses is, rewind, fast forward, pause, like all of these video related indicators when perspective and chronology is changing. So I like books like that. I can see how that format, that structure would drive somebody absolutely up the wall. I like books that are choppy and jump around and cover multiple perspectives. So other than those three things, the Instagram influencer, the fact that it takes place in Ireland, and the way that it is structured uniquely, this is truly just a standard mystery thriller or murder mystery. So not bad, and definitely had some things going for it, even though I was slightly disappointed in the end. Next, I read The X. Well, not next. Like, I'm not talking about these books in the order in which I read them. I'm talking about these books in the order in which I think you'd want to hear about them. But next, I'm going to talk about The X by Alafair Burke. This was my Kindle Roulette selection for the month of September. The X is legal thriller, like part murder mystery, part legal thriller. But it deals with a man who's being accused of killing 3 people, one of whom he holds responsible for his wife's death. And when he is listed as a suspect in the crime, his young teenage daughter contacts his ex-fiance, who is an attorney, to help represent him and help get him out of this mess. Only as more and more evidence starts piling up, and the more she tries to exonerate him of these things, the more she starts to wonder if he actually is guilty. Decent book, decent legal thriller, a very relevant sort of subject matter. Our suspect's name is Jack, and Jack's wife was killed in a mass shooting. So Jack is now the suspect of a multiple homicide where 3 people have been shot and killed, including the father of the young man who acted out the mass shooting. Very confusing storyline, and even more confusing if you read the synopsis. Like, I would say skip that, because that's going to confuse the heck out of you. Characters in this book are not very likable. I think that you should know that going into it. Jack is at the center of the story because everything that's happening is because of him, but the story actually follows Jack's attorney, also his ex-fiance Olivia. I mean, they are one and the same. So you're reading from Olivia's perspective everything that she's doing to try to prove Jack didn't commit these crimes. Then there's backstory that she's also telling you while she's going through this process. She did some horrible things, right? The whole premise, or the whole reason that the daughter calls her and gets her to defend Jack, is because of guilt she feels for things that she did as his fiance. And so you learn about some of these horrible things that she's done, and she's definitely a morally ambiguous character, as is Jack. So that will probably be a roadblock for some folks not really liking most of the characters. I saw where this book was going. I'm not going to say early on. It was past the middle of the book, but it was still long before we actually found out the big reveal. I kind of could see where it was going. Probably another 3-star read for me. I think that fans of legal thrillers will enjoy this. It's not as complex a legal thriller as, say, 13 was. 13 was the arc I read in August by Steve Kavanaugh. So it's accessible. It's easy to read. It's a relevant story in today's social climate. And so I do think that some of you would like it. I am happy to have read it. And yeah. Next is the only physical book that I have to show you. That book is Quiet Man by Kristen Ashley. This is a 1001 Dark Nights novella, and I've spoken to you about the 1001 Dark Nights series before, I think, but quickly, it's just romance authors coming together and writing a novella under this umbrella. The intent is for an author to introduce readers to their characters, their series, their writing style in novella form. So Kristen Ashley's Quiet Man is about the Dream Man series. It's kind of a continuation of the Dream Man series slash the start of something new yet revisited. It was a series of 4 books: Mystery Man, Lawman, Wild Man, and Motorcycle Man. And the first book, Mystery Man, featured an alpha hero who ran his own, they call themselves commandos, or Kristen Ashley and her characters refer to them as commandos. But it's basically like PI slash bodyguard services, only they're not very law abiding. So they're kind of like, they got a little bit of mercenary in them. Quiet Man is about one of the commandos and a side character from Kristen Ashley's Rock Chick series. And Lottie finds herself with some unflattering attention. She is a professional dancer, exotically, and someone is sending her threatening messages, and so she needs a bodyguard. Enter the commandos and Mo, who is assigned to stick to her day and night, sleeping in her room on the couch like craziness. Okay, so not my favorite, not going to lie. You know how I feel about Kristen Ashley. She's a very polarizing author. You either love her or you hate her. And for the most part, I would say 85% of her books I really like, or at least am entertained by. I don't have great things to say about this one, only because there isn't much to say about this one. It's insta-lovey, and the major mystery or the at stakes portion of the book seems to wrap up really quickly. And recently I heard it stated about novellas in particular, it's very difficult to write a successful novella because it's difficult to find a conflict that can be introduced and wrapped up in this short amount of pages. Usually in a novella, what I found is most successful is if you walk into a situation as the reader, meaning the situation already exists, people already know each other, but they find themselves embroiled in this conflict, and you don't need a ton of backstory, maybe just a little bit. Most of it is about the conflict, and then it can wrap up in a novella-like amount of pages. But unfortunately, here we have 2 characters who have no knowledge of the other's existence before this book begins, and they're thrust together and have to have a happily ever after by the end of it, and a life-threatening conflict has to be resolved quickly. It just, I don't know why I'm going on about it, but it just didn't work. It didn't work. And for somebody who loved the Rock Chick series and somebody who loved the Dream Man series, this is weird for me. This is weird for me to accept. It's disappointing. I'm gonna keep it because I have an entire shelf, practically the length of a room, where all of my Kristen Ashley books sit. All right, I'm gonna stop talking. I also read 3 other romance novels, and I blame this on some of the other content that I've been reading, which hasn't come out yet. I haven't talked about it yet in video, but I have read some. I've read a lot of horror lately. I'm not gonna lie, read a lot of horror and some thrillers. And so when I get on my recent reads videos and I talk about all these romance books that I read, I hope you can understand why, which is because I need a break, a cool down period, a realignment of my reading chi. The first is The Day He Came Back by Penelope Ward. So The Day He Came Back is the story of Raven and Gavin. When you first start reading the story, Raven is an adult. She's working as a nurse, a home care nurse for a man, and one day she's interrupted and told that man's son Gavin is there. And what we know is that she's taken by surprise. She's not happy about it. And Gavin and Raven have some sort of history. Then we are thrust into the past and we learn about how Raven's mother worked at Gavin's parents' estate, and Raven herself worked there briefly before she was fired. Gavin's mother absolutely detested her, and as soon as she saw any sort of connection between Gavin and Raven, she did everything that she could to tear them apart. Raven breaks up with Gavin, and that's it for them. There's no more until he shows up and finds out that Raven has taken a position as his father's home care nurse, and they reconcile, or they work on dealing with each other. They work on putting up with each other in this situation. Again, like another 3-star read for me, where I think if you're a fan of these particular things, like second chance romances, then you're really going to like it. And I don't really like new adult romance, but oddly enough, in The Day He Came Back, I really liked their past story much more than I liked their current story or present day story, which is weird for me. Also, I was sort of in the mood for angst. I don't know why. Sometimes I do very much get in the mood for a deliciously angsty romance, and there wasn't as much angst in this one as I wanted there to be, which really surprised me, because it is the perfect premise for angst, and it just wasn't there. It wasn't, again, bad. It wasn't terrible. It was just sort of like, which is not what I want. I want a book that I'm like, can't wait to tell you guys about. This one, I just kind of, as a side note, I read The Day He Came Back by Penelope Ward. I was also a little bit let down by the book Repeat by Kylie Scott. Repeat is the story of a 25-year-old woman named Clementine who has been attacked and therefore left without her memory. In an attempt to try to regain a sense of self and to be able to figure out her life, Clementine wanders into her ex-boyfriend's or ex-fiancés. Were they engaged? I can't remember. Her ex's tattoo studio, and starts asking questions about why they broke up and what the deal is. And it was a bitter and ugly breakup. But here comes this girl with like no memory of it. Therefore, she has no feelings about it. So she's brazenly questioning her ex, who is still not quite healed from it. Ed was emotionally destroyed when Clementine broke up with him, and so her very presence is unsettling and brings up a lot of bad shit. But Ed, because he loved her so deeply, wants to see her through this and can't help but to help her. I really like Kylie Scott. Kylie Scott writes some great books, some both angsty and like ridiculously hot books out there with her name on them. And I don't know if it's that I didn't connect with the characters, or I didn't buy the fact that they were in this situation and would end up wanting to get back into a relationship with each other, given what I knew as the reader. And I've said before, and I'll say 100 times, like, in romance, it is key that you root for your hero and heroine to be together. Otherwise, what are you doing? So I didn't really root for them. I didn't like the main character. I didn't think she was at all particularly sensitive to the fact that she was continuing to just stomp all over this poor guy who had his heart broken. I didn't particularly care whether Ed and Clementine tried again, and so that doesn't make for a very good romance read, in my opinion. It was almost like whatever had made Ed fall in love with Clementine in the first place was completely gone, because she was this very objective kind of person, didn't seem to have a lot of feelings. I'm not sure what his attraction was to her the second time around. That's what it is. Ding! I just put my finger on it. Don't you love how prepared I am to sit down and talk to you about books? Finally, and most recently, I read The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. The Simple Wild is about a 26-year-old woman named Calla who's living in Toronto with her mother and stepfather. Her biological father lives in Alaska. He is a pilot. She gets a phone call from one of his friends one day explaining that he's very ill, he has lung cancer, and if Calla has any intention of, forming a relationship with him, she should go see him. Her mother left her father in Alaska when she was an infant, and short of some phone calls that lasted until her pre-teens, they don't know each other. Calla, who happens to be in the perfect set of circumstances for her to take off to Alaska for a while, decides to go up there and try to A, confront him, or B, forge some relationship with him. While in Alaska, trying to find a place as Wren's daughter, she meets Jonah. Jonah is also a pilot working for Wren, and they don't like each other very much. He's not very nice to her. She doesn't understand why. So they butt heads for a good portion of the book until she trims his beard and realizes she's attracted to him. So here's where we bring the conversation back around to new adult. Calla in The Simple Wild is 26 years old and Jonah is 31. Yet they very much sound like teenagers. I can't imagine a 31-year-old man acting the way that Jonah acts. And only the most annoying, unlikable 26-year-old woman would act like Calla acts, which is spoiled, stuck up, materialistic, their behaviors are forgivable if you're looking at an 18 and 22-year-old. But as a 26-year-old and a 31-year-old, no. So I love, again, the premise of The Simple Wild. A heartbroken bush pilot in Alaska who's dying makes a plea to the daughter he doesn't know to come up and get to know him. And while she's there, she falls in love with the newness of it all, including the boy next door. I mean, but it needed to be told with Calla as an 18-year-old and Jonah as a 22, 23-year-old. That's not how it was told. So I didn't like it. Now, don't get me wrong. The parts that are not about Calla and Jonah's relationship are actually pretty strong. The daughter and father trying to come together amidst tragedy, or what will be a tragedy, the adventures, the on a new adventure trope of, Calla going to a place that she can never remember being because she was so little when she left. Like the backstory of her mother and her father and them splitting up, the role that her stepfather has played. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in this book. This book was emotional. This book made me cry. And don't get me wrong, like nobody on Amazon, or Amazon didn't say to me, this is a romance novel, because I don't even know if it's really categorized that way on Amazon as a romance novel. But what I'm saying is it kind of fails as a romance novel, but it also sort of fails as a general coming of age novel because the characters are already of age. I'm not sure what to do with this. I'm not sure where to put this book in my mind. And I picked it up because, God, I love Alaska. I love a story about Alaska. I love, the wilderness and survival and those kinds of themes anyway. And so I really thought that I would like it. And had I even been reading a new adult book, I would have probably been okay with it. I just wasn't okay with reading about adults who acted like young people. So gosh, that was a real bummer of a recent reads video. Like, what did I say? They were all 3 stars or something. Like, I probably went from 2.5 to 3.5, if I'm being completely honest with you. So you might think September was a real bummer of a reading month for me, but that is not the case. Like I said, this recent reads video only includes books that I haven't already talked about or don't plan on talking about in exclusive type videos. So there's more out there waiting for you, I promise. Like I said, I've read a lot of horror lately. It wasn't a waste. September, I still have good things to say for September. So stay tuned for that. If you have any experience about or questions about any of the books that I talked about in this video, leave all that good stuff down in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.